Hello, hello. Can you hear
Hello.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you great. And is 1337 Marcel?
Yes,
All
correct.
right.
Yeah, let's send a request for him as
Let
well.
me get them up here. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm sure we're going to have some people. Oh, hey, Marcel. Hello, hello.
Hey, you.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I appreciate both of you being here today. I'm really excited to talk to your team. Have been doing a ton of research on SQD, SQDGN. I'm definitely going to introduce the episode. Before I start, let me ask: Is it? I know it's SQD. I think I always say squid degen because it's degenerate squid. Is SQD squid or should we call it SQD?
Yeah, it's a bit complicated. There are two completely like separate entities right now. One is SQD, the first emergent database network, the first decentralized data lake, and SQD Dgen, which is an AI agent, which is essentially like a product incubated by me, bootstrapped by myself and a small team, and which leverages the SQD. And yeah, I guess we'll talk a little bit more about that during the space. Yeah, and SQD is actually a rebrand of Subsquid, which is our original name for the network. Yeah, so Marcel may add something about the rebranding and the past to that.
Yeah. There's not much to say, to be honest. We started out as Subsquid, and later on we decided to focus more on the SQD brand for several reasons. But one of them was that essentially a lot of our potential clients always thought we're mainly based on substrate networks, which back in the days, yeah, was where we started and where kind of like the Subsquid story just evolved from. But by now, I think everyone knows we support EVM also and SVM, and yeah. So essentially, it was more or less like a strategic move. Yeah, and also I think SQD sounds a lot more sharp, to be honest.
It definitely does, but Squid is still really fun, and I think you can get creative with it in the future. Maybe get like an app called Calamari or something. Just throwing out some ideas early on, but really excited for this. I do want to start. I start every episode just kind of framing the episode a little bit, talk about maybe some potential topics. For anyone who's joining for the very first time, this is Does Compute, and for those of you who don't know my background, I've hosted a ton of different spaces here through MVHQ, and the aim of this show is to really get into a little bit deeper conversation with AI. We definitely have had lots of project founders that come up, but we really on this show try to go a level deeper. I want to hear from your guys' perspective what it's like to be building. I would love to get your takes on like the general space. I just see so many conversations where they have these brilliant minds and brilliant founders, but they don't ask them what is their perspective on everything else going around here. So, really excited to talk about it. I definitely want to hear your thoughts on big data, how that's going to empower AI agents. Just what is your guys' read on AI agents in this emerging space? What are use cases for data sets? The whole works. So, really excited for this conversation. And just one more additional point I want to just sneak in here before we begin the show. I understand MVHQ had their TGE yesterday, but that is not what this space is about. This is fully focused on AI and talking with the SQD and SQDGN team. So if you have any questions about that, we're going to be announcing a town hall in a couple of days here, and that's the perfect place to chime in and get those conversations. We always have on this show a portion where we open it up and let the audience ask questions, and I don't want to get rid of that. I just don't believe in the censorship over that there. But again, this whole conversation is in the context of AI. So I just wanted to take a second to address that. But I could not be more excited for these guests that we have today. It's going to be an awesome conversation. And without further ado, yeah, Dima, Marcel, let us know a little bit. I'm just curious because I know you've been working on this data lake and compiling it for 3 years. How did you get the idea to start this decentralized data lake and compile all this data?
Yeah, I can start with that. So we've been building this more than 3 years, and originally we started uh, actually as an internal project. So I've been working on an index layer for a decentralized video platform. And back then, it just appeared to me that getting data from on-chain is incredibly hard. So basically what we have, and still like the go-to solution for many, is to spin up a blockchain node, right? And try to get the data from the node directly. That kind of worked 3 to 4 years ago. But like whenever you see more data coming on-chain, that becomes incredibly difficult to scale. And the nodes are essentially built for consensus and for like writing a relatively small amount of data and getting a consensus on top of it. But they're really, really bad at retrieving data. So this is like the first principle, which immediately leads to the conclusion that in order to have a very efficient way to read this data, you essentially need to build a database that is specifically designed to retrieve this data, right? And then like the next logical step is that you cannot just like put this data into Postgres or like to some other database simply because you want to have the same properties that you expect from a blockchain, right? So you want to have a censorship resistant access to this data. You want to have resilience. You want to have full decentralization. And as a next logical step, you basically come to the conclusion that you actually need to build a completely new type of a database, which is like a global distributed symbol, like a Bitcoin, but it's also a database. And this is how we finally came to the conclusion that we really want to build everything from scratch. And this is what SQD network is, and what we call like the first emergent database network, because it's spread across thousands of nodes. Like the data is essentially like sharded and replicated. It's completely permissionless. It's token gated, so it's more like the basic data primitive, like a Bitcoin for transactions, but essentially a database network for data. So that is kind of like just from the first principles ideas came to the necessity of this solution.
Wow, that's really fascinating just in the way that you're structuring the data like a blockchain. And, I'm curious, and forgive me because I'm not the most technical, but, just hearing you talk about this inefficiency with nodes and that they're only storing a little bit of data, but now knowing your data is structured as this blockchain, how are you still able to ensure stuff like efficiency and just speed of transactions or accessibility of this data while it's structured like a blockchain?
So the blockchain itself and the data that it stores is not that much different from any other data. So a transaction, for example, has like a very specific field, right? So the address that you send the token from to, and like some transaction data, oversimplifying things, but more or less, it's not that much different from any other accounting information that you have, for example, in the Google Sheets. The key property is actually that it is immutable, that it is append only, and that allows you to have a lot of optimizations. And also it is self-certifying, meaning that you can basically just looking at the data, attest that this is indeed the actual data that you got from the blockchain, because you can calculate the hashes and you can essentially verify that the data is indeed uh, coming from like the consensus from, for example, like proof of stake, proof of work, or whatever. So essentially, it's just like a self-signed sort of data. So and that allows you to have a lot of optimizations in the design space and build very efficient from one side solution, and from the other side, fully decentralized. So it's not like a general purpose database like Postgres. It's specifically designed to handle very large amount of data, which is immutable, but at the same time, incredibly scalable and robust when it comes to actually retrieving and reading this data.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, scalability for sure. And I was hoping you could speak on that a little bit. So, if I'm not mistaken, you guys started collecting data for Subsquid, I want to say about 3 years ago. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong there. But as crypto evolves and we see multiple chains emerging, right? Solana's kind of the big chain in town these days, at least in terms of just active users. Are you guys continuing to expand this database or the collection of data across various different chains, new networks, and still keeping this current as the blockchain continues to expand?
Yeah, certainly. So we currently support more than 200 EVM networks and a few SVM, not just Solana, but also Eclipse and soon, and also non-EVM networks like Fuel and Tron, and also Substrate networks. So yeah, this is kind of the very short-term kind of solution where we just essentially add like support for different chains. But the real vision is that we actually have no constraints whatsoever with respect to the data that we serve. That essentially allows us to reuse the underlying infrastructure of this decentralized database to all kinds of data. For example, like pricing data, or for example, I don't know, inflation data in the future. The idea is that the community itself will be able to figure out what data is actually needed and figure out what kind of slice and dice of the data is more convenient to use, and then you get getting essentially like all kind of sorts of different data sets that are accessible directly from the data lake. So yeah, it's kind of the vision is that it's more like a data ocean for like different kinds of data that you can query directly from there. More like a big query from Google, but interplanetary and like global in its nature.
I think you can like really see it as kind of like a paradigm shift, whereas like currently most of the data is closed, right? It's siloed, and accessing it is like very expensive, usually vendor locked, and also often very slow. And here we are like our goal was really to just develop something that actually is gonna change the world in a way that there's this just open database network where everyone can contribute data to and data sets, as Dimitri just mentioned. So we really think that right now it's just Web3, right? But in the future, it can also be all sorts of Web2 data. And that's really when the real magic is going to unfold. But in general, we are just like true believers in having it be like fully permissionless and open. And I think that's the key message here.
Wow, I'm really intrigued by that. And, 100%, I really, enjoy the vision with this between, or, just having this data shape and structure the world. And my friend, when they first told me about SQD, I didn't really fully grasp the importance or just what a big infrastructure foundation this can set for applications or people to build with. But when you talk about these subsets of data and accessibility, it really becomes clear that there is just so much opportunity to build using this data. So just bouncing off this idea of subsets or people leveraging this data in different ways, are there any use cases or ideas that you had in mind of things we might see soon, or maybe potentially any clients or just users of that are already leveraging your data in unique ways? I know right now we just see a ton of people using trading data to come up with sort of analysis bots, and that's kind of been the in style AI for at least the past couple of months. But I'm always curious if there's other use cases that we really haven't seen yet, but you think are working in the background.
I think first of all, in the past, I think that's like in the past we've seen most of our clients actually be, I think, in the field of DeFi. That was actually pretty big, and now was more or less like these new use cases. And I think like in terms of AI agent, probably Dimitri has some more alpha to talk about. I'm not sure how much we can actually say on the stream or on the podcast now, but Dima, probably you have some more interesting insights to share.
Yeah, so first of all, I would like to start with a very nice quote of Jeff Bezos, is that people normally want to focus on what is changing and like try to predict what's coming, but rarely do they focus on what doesn't change. And but this is actually the most important part, right? And in our case, we've been around here in the space since 2017 and like building SQD since like 3-4 years ago, and we really see how applications change. So the landscape essentially like moving from dApps to AI agents, but what doesn't change is the need to have a very clean and structured data access. The only difference is that for before, for DeFi applications and for dApps, normally you would need to have a specific data for your own specific application. So for example, you're building a DAX and you want to have a specific dashboard for the trades of this DAX, right? So you build like a specific indexer for like a set of contracts, and you have some aggregations and whatnot, and you're focused specifically on like a very limited kind of subset of that. And now you have AI agents, which are by design assumed to be kind of omnipotent in the sense that they really want to have access to all kind of different data on demand, right? So I can ask about Uniswap, and I expect to have some information about Uniswap directly. I can ask about some Jupiter or like Meteor on Solana, and I want to get this data immediately, right? So I don't really have this privilege of narrowing down the scope down to specific data, right? But the common denominator still is access to the structured data. So the agents, they operate on like a textual level. So it's something that they can trip around and hallucinate, but the like actual hard truth coming from the structured data, right? And this is what doesn't change, and we're still in this space. So that's why we kind of like uniquely positioned to that. Now coming back to the question about the applications in the agents, it's definitely changing. I can tell exactly, like more or less, like where we are, and SQD Gen is actually like a very great example. Is that we're focusing on copy trades. So basically, we're analyzing different trades that happen on chain, extracting the alpha from who is buying which tokens, trying to catch the signal from who is buying, like who is also holding this token, whether they're accumulating, and that turned out to be a very powerful signal, especially if you can analyze the behavior of the different accounts. What is interesting is that there are relatively many low-hanging fruits that you can implement using just centralized APIs, for example, just like, I don't know, looking at the DEX screener on CoinMarketCap, or like CoinGecko, and like trying to mix and match like this different APIs, and you probably get like a relatively good baseline for this. But the problem is that this is just accessible, so everyone will fairly quickly to catch up to this baseline. And in order to get this edge, you really need to improve your data pipeline and have a lot more sophisticated pipelines to extract this alpha. And this is why for SQD Gen, having kind of royal road to the data through SQD is kind of an unfair privilege, in the sense that we can like start small with the same baseline, which already gives like a pretty good signals. But for example, on Solana, we will be able to have our own in-house kind of engine to figure out the most important traders across, say, thousands, if not like hundreds of thousands of different accounts and like different tokens in real time. This is something that no other platform like DEX Screener or something will give access to, simply because it's just too niche and too complicated, even like to serve to the public. It's something that you can only implement as something that you have in-house, so to speak. And this is just an example where having kind of access to the lower level and to have a lot more kind of control and power of what you built gives you like an unfair advantage and edge over contenders in like a short, mid, long term. And yeah, this is why kind of I'm fairly confident that SQDD Gen may not be like that much visible right now because it's just like 1 month old, but it has a lot more upside compared to like this low hanging fruits that basically have not that much room to grow further.
Wow. No, I'm really interested in seeing it. I mean, I've already just been seeing through the release of SQDGN and just kind of where its tweets are today. It's definitely been evolving. And I think this leads into a question about the indexing of data. So I definitely appreciate what you're saying, and just having that in house data available, can absolutely understand how that gives you an edge. Can you talk to me a little bit about the process of how you can identify those within the data, right? Because again, not the biggest tech perspective on my tech background from my perspective, but I'm really curious, how do you take these giant data sets and you can identify what is relevant and sort of understand what that intersection is of all of these indicators at once, make for a successful trade. And then with this data being decentralized, how do you maintain that edge? Because once you can kind of identify this strategy of, hey, this has a high signal of working, and with copy trading, would it ever get to a point where if everyone's just copy trading the same trade that it's sort of invalidated because the trade gets crowded? Can it then identify what the new signals are, and how much of that can it identify on its own versus do you as a trader who has this knowledge, decide to index it in a certain way, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So the copy trading itself is not new, right? But the key problem is that there are just thousands of different copy trades, and the key issue is to find the right ones to copy, right? And this is what exactly SQDGen is currently doing. So the first step is to just analyze all the I would say like major traders to get the kind of the first funnel of the copy trades to consider. And that already reduces the amount of data that you want to analyze. And then you have another evolving model that basically tells you which trades are interesting and which one are more important. And here there are like two different steps where you can earn your edge. The first step is to refine the first step of the funnel, basically like figuring out the most important addresses because they're not necessarily easy to spot. And the second is to trim down this funnel into the actual actionable trade and do not actually overtrade stuff, right? And both of this are a little bit different, but by and large, reduced to having uh, just a lot more data, being able to efficiently analyze it, and being able to iterate and update the alpha almost in real time, because it is kind of like a law of nature that no alpha is eternal, right? So you have to constantly update it in order to retain the edge. And again, having a better data pipeline in the long run gives you this edge just by allowing you to update the alpha when everyone else catches up.
Oh wow, that was a really eloquent answer. I really like that. So, and I guess to your first point about how easy this data set is to find subsets of data and then decide how you're going to slice it up, that's what allows you to remain flexible as that alpha changes. You can just split the data set however you need to then, find the new funnel of determining alpha and then apply that to whatever agent you're feeding. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, but also when it comes to Solana, for example, it's just like sheer amount of this data that you also want to process as fast as possible because time also becomes your edge, right? So I think there are like thousands of shitcoins launching on Pumped Fund like every minute, right? So you really need to have a robust pipeline in order to figure out like which one are good. Then you have like hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of addresses that you want to sift through and figure out like which one are like worth looking at, right? Especially when people essentially like changing their addresses and like going to the new ones, and then you only can make this work when you have like a relatively big data and efficient algorithms, for example, to figure out that, for example, the addresses have a lot of uh, like many tokens that they hold simultaneously. So they kind of share a lot of tokens. So that probably means that they're kind of similar in their behavior. And like if one historically been performing pretty well, that probably the other one is aping into something that is worth considering. And like again, it's just being able to quickly ingest this data, process this data, and also analyze this data is what gives you an edge. And SQD essentially solves the data problem here. But of course, it doesn't like solve you the model data on the spot. So this is kind of the most interesting part, but it's definitely like makes a huge kind of alpha when it comes to people who like just don't use the right way to ingest data, right? So for example, it's like a tremendous edge over people who are using, I don't know, just like a Geyser plugin for Solana, for example.
Gotcha. And then, so I'm curious for SQD for people who want to ingest this data, because I saw a thread that you posted where I think it was a comment on an AIXBT tweet where they put up their sort of model there and you really highlighted the indexing layer. How can people who are developing projects and want to make their own subsets of your data, how are they able to leverage this speed and efficiency of your, collection of data here to index and stay ahead of the market?
Yeah, so here there is a lot of things that are in progress. Expect a lot of big updates in 2-3 weeks. But in general, the idea is that it's like a modular pipeline where we have efficient tooling to transform and filter the data, and also the actual stream of raw data provided by the SQD network. So essentially, like SQD network allows you to get a stream of raw data that matches the filters that you set up. For example, you say, okay, I'm interested in like this token pair from like Radium, and I'm interested in like this specific subset of addresses, for example. And then there is the tooling part that you sort of install on your own. It's not part of the SQD network, which allows you to, for example, immediately transfer this data and put into your own database, for example, or in like a ClickHouse or into Kafka. And the beauty is that this thing is completely decentralized in the sense that you don't have any kind of limits and limitations on the platform level of what kind of data rate limits or like API access you get ingesting the raw data. So as if you're actually like running your own super powered Solana node with the ability to even filter deeply into like kind of different slices of data that you need. So I think it's getting a little bit more complicated, but the idea is that getting kind of modular with different tools and dissecting this pipeline into pieces where as a developer you can tune and like put these Legos together the way you like, makes it incredibly flexible and powerful, in particular for adjusting this to indexers for AI agents.
Wow. And I want to take a step back because previously in the conversation, I think it was either you or Marcel mentioned that you see a future where this stuff is applicable to Web 2. And when you're just talking about the speed and efficacy of accessing this data in conjunction with tooling, is this sort of framework of how you're approaching Web 3? Is that how you're planning on potentially bridging this gap to Web 2 in the future? Because I guess the first thing that stood out to me is like, well, the crypto data probably isn't as relevant in a Web 2 sense. But if you can take this whole model that you've developed, or sort of this, I guess, whole system, and then apply that to Web 2, that gets really interesting.
I mean,
Marcel, you
yeah,
want to chime in?
yeah. I mean, essentially, that's part of the big vision. Part of the big vision is actually to get the Web2 data also into the network, and we do believe that this is going to be one of the big things. But right now, we are like focused on just really trying to make our database network, let's say, more accessible for AI agents, and in general, like whatever kind of like automated bots or like robots there will be in the future, all of them will be all of them will need access to this data, and our goal is just to make it as easy as possible to get this data, but essentially in a self-sovereign way, right? Meaning there's no centralized gatekeeping. And part of our vision already, like a few years ago, I mean, back in the days, we didn't know it's going to be AI agents, but we were always building for this world where there's going to be more autonomy, right? And we knew like stuff has to be just available basically within this own digital ecosystem. And AI agents are just like one of the potential use cases which we will see evolve. So yeah, I hope this answers your question, because like right now this is our focus, but of course we have like this broader, bigger vision, and we're always like looking forward to implement these things, but step by step. And as you know, we've been building for years, so it's going to take a few more years to get to this stage as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I definitely want to ask some questions just about AI in the space. And I think that'll be a great second half of the conversation, is just diving in and exploring sort of, what are your guys' thoughts on AI and all that. But I do want to just take a second here to clarify just sort of the role of the SQD token. Because, just hearing so much about how scalable this data is and how accessible it is, like I'm just used to, data being hosted by a cloud company and it charging all of that. What is sort of the role of SQD in the ecosystem as it relates to access of the data versus ownership of the data?
I think before Dima maybe goes a bit more into the nitty gritty, I think the key difference towards what people are probably used to here is that right now, in the current implementation, or basically in the current vision, is that we don't think it makes sense to pay for the data, in a sense where like you pay with a token, right? The token is a volatile asset. And I think that doesn't really make sense. So essentially here we have different gateways and different ways of accessing the data. And essentially the gateway users who access the data, they stake the token. And they bond the token, and that's how they access the data in the network. So essentially, as long as they stake, they get access to the data, and then afterwards, yeah, they can just withdraw the tokens, and they are back with the main amount. But here, I think Dimitri, this is a part for you again, where you can really talk a bit more about the portals and what it actually enables with like all of these indirect sales channels and what we have planned, I think, in making this data also a lot more accessible for enterprises.
Yeah, I would like to add actually is that before, the default scenario for any kind of infra protocols was to make your token essentially like a payment token, and I like always hated this idea because like what the hell, like for example, you're paying in your native tokens for like data access or like whatever service, and like today you're paying $1 for that, and tomorrow you're going to pay like $10 because like it moons or like whatever. So it's a complete like mass nightmare. Or you would rather integrate some kind of pegging to stable coins, which is also like supernatural. And that's why a much more elegant way is to use staking. So basically, the total supply of the token represents like the total kind of value of the network that you have, and by owning the some amount of tokens and like staking it, you basically have the right of this specific bandwidth. In the case of SQD, essentially by staking some amount of SQD, you basically take access to a specific throughput to the network, meaning that you can make like certain amount of requests per second. And the more tokens you stake, the more data you can essentially extract per second. And this is kind of supernatural, and to my kind of amusement and surprise, many recent protocols started to adopt a similar scheme. So for example, this VVV, this Venus that hyped, they actually essentially took the same model, right? So they kind of say, okay, it's not a payment, but in order to get access to the resources, in their case, it's inference, you have to stake, and essentially this is how you get access, right? So it's supernatural. It's more like a taxi medallion scheme, and also you can mentally compare it with the property kind of thing. So you have limited plot of land. Think of like Manhattan, and this is where you can like the total supply of the token, which doesn't grow, and then you have like an ever expanding economy, which is like the network itself, and one token is basically like the like essentially a plot of the land in this Manhattan, and like as long as things are booming and the capacity grows, the amount of traffic grows, the cost of this plot of land immediately increases in value. So this is like a good mental model of understanding how this token as a kind of the means of distributing the resources works. And I think it's like a pretty elegant way to fairly allocate the resources without even introducing this volatile asset prices and like introducing payment as a token, which is really like a bullshit strategy.
Dude, that's awesome. Like, I'm genuinely just mind blown right now that you thought of such a unique solution. And yeah, I mean, eloquent, I think, is 100% the right word. Like, that's so cool. And my enthusiasm is completely genuine here. Like, I've talked to just so many founders and have always, talked about tokens, and it's usually the same, just tokenomics to some extent of like, oh, we pay for the token and maybe there's some burn. But just the fact that you've thought about such a unique solution, especially when it comes to accessing data, which there sort of seems to be an industry blueprint for. Just props to you guys. That's genuinely super cool.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
thanks. Yeah,
Yeah, thanks a
I
lot.
would just like want to take like a credit where it's used, that like as like all great ideas that are not like for burn out of space. I think one of the first moves in the directions were done by actually like Pocket Protocol. But unfortunately, like for them, I think it was like a big imbalance, so it didn't quite work out. So we learned like, and took the best part of it. But like yeah, in general, like the credit where the credit's due. So it's not like 100% our invention, but I do believe it's still like super elegant.
No, I really appreciate it. And kudos for giving shout outs to other teams. That's awesome. So I definitely want to now pivot over more into AI. And as I mentioned with framing this episode, I'm just really curious your guys' perspective here because I've been through a few cycles in crypto. And it sounds like you guys didn't know at the time when you started building this that AI agents were going to be this market cycle. I don't think anyone knew. At what point in time were you aware of these AI agents? Like, I'm just wondering the first time you saw these enter into the crypto sphere, even if you didn't know at the time that that was going to be a possible use case for your data, but just where's the first time you heard about AI agents as it relates to crypto?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I think one of the eye openers for us was the conversation with M31, a very fundamentals driven VC fund who introduced it. Like we were actually already trading, so we didn't like no OTC deal. and they specifically emphasized, I think it was almost a year ago, like half a year ago. Back then, no one was actually talking about the AI agents, but they said, like, dudes, every G applications are going to be big, and you really should think about them, because this is probably going to be the key demand driver for your network. Because back then we were mostly focused on indexing for like dApps, as I said. Uh, but at the same time, I want to highlight again this idea is that things are changing, and it's very hard to predict where they're going. And we are at the same time essentially focus on things that don't change that much. And to make a comparison, think of the projects in crypto that survived or like still stay relevant since say 2017, 2018, which is like not that long ago, right? But for by crypto standards, it's like eternity. And one of the things that come to my mind is actually coin market cap or like CoinGecko. Why? Because things that people just like want to look up the prices and like stay up to date on the actual like hard data, that thing doesn't go anywhere. And this is like just the possibility like to get things on your screen and have like a simple ground truth information is what doesn't change. In a similar way, like this need for whatever use case and applications to get like this structured and fast access to the on-chain data doesn't go anywhere. And this AI agents, they basically didn't quite change our internal roadmap. They changed the way that we built kind of tooling, but the underlying SQD network didn't even like change a bit in order to serve this like new landscape. And like whatever next comes will be like we're pretty confident that we are going to be like super well positioned for this because like this just like fundamentals don't change.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, it's really clear to me that you guys have just thought a lot of this out. I'm always having to like think of what is the next question to ask, but I'm just continually processing everything you're saying. And it's just, again, hats off to you guys for just being so prepared and just having such good answers to all of these questions. I wasn't expecting such in-depth responses to everything, but I certainly appreciate it and I'm absolutely here for it. I do kind of want to take just, in that vein where you're talking about data that's relevant and just how it's always here. Like CoinGecko is the perfect example. I'm curious with your data set that you've accumulated, the trends in crypto change so quickly. How relevant is some of this earlier data that you have in the data lake? And, I'm just wondering because we see some other data, I guess, solutions out there that have smaller subsets of data. When you're analyzing current data on Solana or some of these newer chains, is it still relevant to have just this massive accumulation of data from, let's say, 2020 versus just the current day? Like, how much are you weighting past data versus current?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's certainly true that the recent data is more valuable compared to the historical one. But in order to, for example, build a sophisticated model, you would normally need to backtest it on a very big amount of data, and the more data, the better. So at the same time, yeah, we are actually introducing this change on the SQD network, basically what we call dynamic replication, meaning that the amount of nodes serving a specific piece of, say, Solana data depends on the age. So that means that it will be more efficient and more scalable even when, for example, the Solana data grows like even 10x, meaning that there will be just like a few nodes that are served like ancient data. So you're still able to query it, but at the same time we can serve the more recent data, which is more in demand, with a lot more nodes. So then you basically balance the capacity and the speed depending on the demand.
No, wow, very cool. I do want to switch back to the conversation about AI agents, and I definitely want to talk to you about SQDGN. So, in terms of the Jeff Bezos quote of just how people are focusing on things that are changing, I'd say you were one of the earlier projects on the Virtuals Network to launch, and I'm curious for you what that meant. We see the vision of SQDGN now, where it's sort of the proof of the SQD data, right? And you're showing one of the use cases of applying it, and you're out here fine tuning and continuing to iterate on it. But in terms of keeping up with the current meta or launching an AI agent, at some point you made the decision, hey, this is something I'm going to launch. And I'm just curious what that thought process for you looked like, where you knew, hey, this is time that I'm going to put something out into the world.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I guess like it's touched upon this like drama that we had on the launch, and like we had like some internal and legal reasons to separate SQD and SQD Gen. But the story is that it was just obvious that we need to go in this direction. And as in many cases, in order to go and succeed, you don't need to be right 100% of time, but you need to be at least a little bit like directionally correct, right? And here it was like 100% clear that like going to AI agent space and virtuals was just like the most obvious way to do that is just like directionally correct. And then it was obvious that in order to serve the data to AI agents and the most efficient way, we need to dogfood this stuff. So we actually need to build AI agents ourselves, right? And so that was just like an obvious way to do that. And then, like once this launch happened, you have the token, like you have an agent, and like you have like a very vague understanding and like very kind of understanding that you're directionally correct, but then you actually have to execute and implement. And at the same time, you know that you're actually very well positioned. So the decision was to actually assemble a small but very agile team that is operationally independent from the SQD for two reasons. First is that this is like genuine dogfooding of the tooling, meaning that you basically don't know, like the team that builds SQD Gen has very little knowledge about the internals of SQD, only the interfaces. So basically, that allows us to have like a general conversation as if they were just like external clients, right? So we basically have a lot better like understanding what kind of tooling are needed. And the second, they're super cracked on solving the SQD Gen issues, which is like super interesting space when it comes to like machine learning, like data engineering, and they don't really want to spend a lot of time on the data side, which is actually the job of the SQD of the SQD team. So that's why it is kind of deliberately separate, even on the operational level, even though of course it's like yin and yang, and it's just like again like directionally very clear path that benefits both projects.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's really cool. I didn't realize that there were two separate, I guess, functional teams, you could call it. I didn't realize that you had separate devs working on SQDGN as opposed to SQD.
Yes, and SQDD Gen is like relatively small team. We're expanding on it, but they're like fully operationally independent. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. And I want to ask you a question, Dima, and apologies because this is definitely going to be a more hard-hitting question, but it's not meant in any like gotcha sort of sense. I just want to be upfront about that. But I am really just curious from a developer's perspective, and like I said at the start of the episode, I want to ask questions that I don't hear other shows talk about. But I was around when you launched SQDGN. And as crypto does, people began to speculate before there was any form of official announcement, and there was some drama around the launch, like you said. What was that like from your perspective? I read all of your responses, and I thought they were very well thought through. But through Twitter, people are just hurling comments anonymously, and you're a real person on the other end of that comment. So I'm just curious, what was that experience like for you? How do you feel like it went? And just moving forward, does any of that still stick with you, or is it just something you brush off and move past?
Well, to be honest, my first reaction, like, what the fuck is going on? Because I was like genuinely surprised that people like sniped my personal address like within seconds of launching this agent. So like I didn't even like expect that to be that big, like within the first hour of the launch. And yeah, I was like completely flabbergasted. And at the same time, yeah, of course, like once you see like so much excitement, like you just don't really understand much of like how to from one point you don't really want to kind of kill the momentum and disappoint people, and at the same time don't really want to set unreasonably high expectations. So at the end of the day, like the next day, we kind of like got together with Marcel and the other executive team, like try to figure out like what the fuck is going on, like how do we actually like address this, because like we don't want to overhype a product which doesn't exist at the moment, and at the same time like there are like a lot of kind of unexpected legal tensions potentially. So what we actually did the next day at SKD is just like to set very clear expectations, right? And of course the market overreacted, and because they were expecting that like we basically unveil something like as good and like as big as AI XBT the next day, right? Which is like basically nonsense, and like yeah. But I just like made it clear pretty much the next day is that the thing is just like not a stunt. It's going to like live. It's just that something that is just like was born is getting developed. And yeah, so people kind of overreacted and sold like the tokens immediately. I don't feel any kind of, I would say, uh, I don't really feel the accusations that were thrown at us and the have any kind of grounds, because like we never promised anything. People were just like blindly aping, and that they kind of like bought at the top and like sold at the bottom. That's kind of their own decision. No one actually pushed them to do that, right? And like we're not really responsible for like degen trading, right? So and like who knows? Like if you just like called it, then one day it could be even higher than the all-time high that it had within hours after trading. But at the end of the day, it's like your responsibility for your money, right? So it's like obviously tremendously high risk operation, like aping into something that has just like some vague connection to like another project that you may think is going big. I mean, like what, like what I'm talking about, right? So yeah, at the same time, I'm really sorry for people who kind of like gambled and like lost a lot of people. So yeah, we do plan that like we'll launch like the product uh, and like the project gonna live on. So yeah, that's basically like what we promised, and that like what we are trying to deliver.
I think just to make it clear here that essentially like Dima was just exploring and trying out things, and like I didn't even know until like the next morning. And I was like, what the fuck just happened? And it was essentially really like everyone probably thought we had like this well thought out plan how to launch this agent, but no, it was like just Dima as a dev being a scientist and just exploring new tech. And yeah, it was maybe not the perfect launch, and but from now on, I think there's like a lot of synergies, and I do see a lot of potential in the agent as well.
Awesome. Appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for, giving me the opportunity to ask a more difficult question. And I just appreciate the human response, right? And I mean, like I said, there's obviously multiple perspectives, and you usually don't get to hear the perspectives of the founder, but I could definitely understand that knee jerk, like what the fuck feeling of just how are people finding this so quickly. And I mean, exactly to your point, right? People were just wildly speculating. There was tweet threads being like, "Well, here's what's happening," but at no point did you communicate like, "This is what we have." This was all just speculation. So, it's
I mean, one more thing to mention is that, I mean, don't get me wrong, Dima. I really like your tweets, but like usually not too many people care when he tweets, you know. And all of a sudden, all of crypto Twitter was like going over his tweet. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like once again, it's just insane. Like it actually really shows like that. Like sometimes if there's some kind of like narrative market fit, I think that's what I call it. Crypto is just wild. Like if people jump onto some narrative, it can get crazy.
Yeah, it really can. But focusing on SQDGN today, I know earlier this week you guys had stage zero or phase zero of hatchling, and congratulations on that, by the way, and just having that next iteration. In terms of, again, going back to the Jeff Bezos quote of "we really don't know what's going to change." I know you've sort of plotted out this path for SQDGN. Is that something that you think is more or less the, rails moving forward for this project, or is it something that the team is continually evaluating? Where is the alpha in the market? How can we adjust this thing and just, iteratively over time make the baddest agent out there?
Well, yeah, it's like as usual, just like a normal product development process. So you have a fairly good understanding and certainty of what going to happen, like within, I would say, like 1 to 2 months. A little less, like more wiggle room when you go more into the future, and like more like a direction, like when it comes to like 1 2 years, it's like more about vision. And the vision is that ASCII Gen will be first of all super sharp on copy trading. So basically, not just humans, but other AI agents would be able to immediately get this crisp, sharp information about like what smart money essentially thinks about a specific ticker. And for example, I would say what does smart money do with, I don't know, like shitcoin with rocket hat 3D, and then you will see like, okay, like this interesting smart uh, money wallets were accumulating. The first thing. The second is that it's going to be super personalized and powered by what we call swarm intelligence. So basically, we have this like idea outlined in the white paper, is that you can actually vote on the kind of profitability of the trade, or more or less just you look at the ticker, you look at the statistics, you look at the chart, and you essentially just like the setup or not, right? And there are a lot of platforms where, as a trader, you're asked like multiple questions that are super boring in order to get your like risk profile. But making a super slick UI and UX, which basically allows the platform to build super personalized trading experience without mentally overloading the trader, is kind of our super goal. And we have like a lot of super secret features that we want to introduce fairly quickly, starting with Twitter, then essentially like moving people for more perks to the terminal with like instant trading and like instant execution, uh, at the same time being personalized, at the same time super sharp on highlighting the alphas that are matching the specific trader habits. Uh, so yeah, these are essentially the direction that is outlined, and yeah, as I say, fairly good, clear roadmap for the next 1 or 2 months. Uh, and other than that, it's just like a understanding and the direction where the thing can go in 2 3 years.
I'm
and just like clear understanding where our edge is.
Gotcha. No, I'm really looking forward to seeing that be refined and just watching the process. And like I said, just watching Stage Zero launch this week was pretty exciting. And I'm not gonna lie, I held my breath a little bit when you said rugged 3D hat on Soul. I was like, oh gosh, here we go again, right? Just wait until the crowd hears that one back and sends that token flying. No, just a joke there. I did want to ask you about swarm technology a little bit, and I don't remember if it was on your Twitter, Dima, but I want to say I saw a thread just talking about how Polymarket has predicted real life events more um, precisely than a lot of these other polling companies or tooling that's available there, and just leveraging the power of crowdsourcing information. How much of this sort of swarms tech as it applies to SQDGN was, inspired by some of these breakthroughs that we've seen on Polytrader versus was that just stuff that you, saw as you were going through SQD data sets?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Yeah, and there is like this kind of secret sauce that we want to integrate is that by making the trading personalized and social, you can actually have a positive flywheel and a feedback loop where your model and your agent is getting better at predicting the traits, and that attracts more people who provide their own insights in alpha. All individual insights may actually be met, but like it turns out that when it comes to betting and like putting some money, basically like putting your money where your mouth is, people getting a little bit smarter, especially when you aggregate across a big amount of people, and that will further improve the model and so on. So that is kind of the vision and the idea that you want to execute. There are a lot of like moving parts in order to make it work, and one of the key ingredients is to actually have it like that simple to onboard to the platform. And like we think about like this kind of Tinder style voting, so that you don't really have to um, turn many novels, but at the same time, you really want to think a little bit because you're actually putting your own money into this. So I believe that when executed uh, in the right way, it could be like a unique and the first kind of hybrid model where we take the best signals both from the data part and from the cloud intelligence. Sorry, crowd intelligence, yeah, swarm intelligence, if you want.
Wow, I'm really excited to see it because I mean, I think at this point with AI agents, like we've seen a few that have tried to do not copy trading, maybe a couple. I more so just see like trend analysis, but it's really funny because it's like almost every time, at least I would say it was more popular a couple months ago, but there was always like a lot of trade agents that would come out and they'd be really successful for the first couple of trades because it would just be people tailing their call outs and then those would be successful, but then there was sort of a diminishing returns after a while. So then taking this hybrid approach of like, here's the consensus amongst various traders, but at the same time, it's leveraging a data set. Like, I'm just really excited to see the results of that compared to stuff that we've seen previously in the space.
Yeah, of course, and of course you have to be like smart. So, for example, you cannot just like, for example, like put all your alpha on Twitter where people just like immediately eat it out, right? So first of all, the terminal will provide you a lot faster execution. So the like Twitter public users will get like less trades and like with a bigger delay. And the second is that like this mechanic will allow you to essentially like spread this alpha out across like many trades, so not everyone essentially apes into the same trade simultaneously. So because they're like seeing different trades at different time. So again, like with the right execution, you may make it work even when you have like a lot of people on the platform, but they're kind of orchestrated in the right way. So they don't really ape and eat out all the liquidity of just like some shit coin at the same time.
Gotcha. And I guess that kind of ties in a little bit to tooling, perhaps. I hope I'm using that in the right context. But I'm curious when you guys, provided the logic to SQDGN, or I guess the SQDGN team, and sort of helped make sense of all of this big data that you're feeding into it. How do you sort of draw that line of this is the signal to look for, and then this is the strength of that signal that you need, right? Because to your point, there might be a confluence of here's traders that have been successful, and here's things that they have held before, or it indicates that this is a high probability setup. But then what threshold do you need of, like, well, we have the right components of that signal, but now it's a really strong signal versus a weaker one, and then this is the threshold of how strong that signal is for SQDGN to tweet about it.
Well, we start with something very simple, and then we iterate. And this like very simple setup we started from is to actually like take at the top 200 traders on interface, which is, by the way, built on SQD indexers. So, and they're our friends. And basically like watching the activity of this like top 200 traders on interface is like this like starting point for figuring out where to seek the alpha. And then we have this many trades. We're like going into a single stream, and you essentially like train a relatively like not LLM, right? But you actually learn machine learning style signals, which you can extract and backtest it, right? And that's like, again, the recipe is to start with something super simple and then essentially build up the complexity. And it turns out that in many cases, super simple, clearly explainable models are performing a lot better compared to something like super convoluted that you cannot even explain how it works. And also, it's an important point, like you may ask, like where exactly AI agent here, right? It's like where exactly LLM here is. And this is where the kind of textual power comes in. So LLM can present the information in a more digestible and readable format, and provide in the future more like interactive interface for humans and agents alike. So then you can actually like query it in human language about like any ticker.
Oh wow. Yeah, I really like that blend of the human element there, and that, an AI big component is just the digestibility, because I mean completely agree, like it's interesting, like you see, people who are newer to trading, you'll see trade setups or just like a desk setup that has a trillion different indicators, and sometimes you can't make sense of any of that. And so it's just interesting to hear you saying that, one, sometimes less is more, and then two, just the big component is how people can interpret that and actually get use out of it. So that's really cool. A question that actually popped into my mind while you were talking about this is, like, as people continue to develop applications or different AI agents, whatever we want to call it, with SQD and using the data set, is that something that becomes part of like an SQD ecosystem? Is that something that's, like you guys would, I guess, encourage these projects that are working on it or highlight them, or are you really just focused on SQD, SQDGN, and just, allowing people to access your data however they see fit?
No, I think we're really open to anyone, and I think we're actually working on a grants program which we're going to launch pretty soon. And yeah, like one of our key goals is to get as many AI agents to utilize the network as possible, and also just get the product feedback, right? I mean, this is essentially also what Dimitri said. Also for SQDGen, like a part of the secret sauce is also having like a small dedicated community of like daily testers and people providing feedback and actually letting us know what the product should be like. And I think this is crucial for the adoption of SQD, but also for the general adoption of all AI agents. So yeah, I think we're pretty much open here.
Awesome. And I feel like this is a great place as just a natural plug, usually do at the end of the episode. But for people who want to reach out to you guys or just explore different use cases for the data that you have, what's a good way for them to become a part of the community, stay in contact with SQD, and, have discussions with other members?
I mean, ideally, you go to sqd.ai, you scroll down, you join the Telegram, and if you're a developer, just message us in the SQD official chat, and we'll invite you to the dedicated developer chat of SQD. And I think for SQD Gen, Dima, go ahead. you can also provide the socials if you want now.
Yeah, SQD DGen official Telegram chat, and we have like a pretty cracked group of our, what we call SQD DGen early access. So top holders provide like direct feedback, like grilling our updates. I really like the dynamics, like really straightforward and straight to the point. That allows us to iterate super fast. And then we have like a bigger SQD DGen official where we have all the people, all the traders, and yeah, of course, the socials. Hello SQD and hello SQD Degen are the two, and certainly like all the updates appear there as well. So that, I guess, the call to action number one and number two: subscribe to Hello SQD and subscribe to Hello SQD Degen.
Awesome. Well, I think we have reached the portion of the show where we take questions from the audience, and I am once again going to plug that this conversation is specifically about AI and the SQDGN team. I really don't like to censor any guests that we have, but if it is off topic and not related to the project, I will ask you to refrain from asking questions. But if anyone has any questions for Dima or Marcel related to SQD or SQDGN, feel free to request that mic. It is in the bottom left corner, and we will get you up here with the SQD team. And then while we wait for a couple questions, if there are any to trickle in here, just have some fun questions that I wrote down but never got a chance to ask. But just again, thank you guys for taking the time to be here. I mean, I'm just was so excited to speak with you both. Um, I really think that your project, amongst others, it just shows, like, it stands out because I can tell you guys are really building it. And I talked about this in the last episode we have, but I feel like there's this market shift that's needed with AI where the expectation of time shifts. So maybe I can start with that as sort of a, well, I guess it's not as fun a question as some of the others I have here, but just kind of curious from your guys' perspective, do you think crypto will ever be able to adjust their time frames? It's like a week in crypto is a year in the real world. And it seems like people just want instant gratification with projects delivering stuff, but gone are the days of NFTs where it's just images. There's sophisticated tech solutions that need to be thought out, and that takes a lot longer. So what are your guys' perspective of just adjusting that time frame?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I would say that uh, the crypto space definitely matures. Uh, I personally think that like a knee-jerk reaction whenever a new narrative appears is to build sort of a marketplace and try to lock in as much attention to a specific platform as possible. I'm not really big fan of it, and I don't think it really plays out in big time. So I'm kind of long enough in the space to remember, for example, this protocol called Bancor, and because back then it was just like the essence of the DeFi era, and like this knee-jerk reaction was, okay, so we gonna have a DEX where all the trades gonna go through our native token, Bancor token, which obviously attracted a lot of attention. I think they raised like 300 K Ethereum, right? I think they're still just like sitting in this treasury coffers, but obviously it didn't play out, right? So I'm not really that bullish on the platforms which try to kind of capitalize on the hype and trying to kind of convince the world that everyone will be just like using them because things are getting like more complicated, more difficult, different, more flexible. At the same time, this kind of like a different level of soil and substrate, which eventually shifts up more sophisticated and polished products. And instead of like Bancor, we now have Hyperliquid, right? So it's more or less directionally the same thing, but it's just like pages when it comes to like the actual product, right? And then instead of Bancor, we have like Uniswap version 4, which is like again like miles ahead. So yeah, I think just yeah, getting like a little bit off topic, I guess here, but like I'm all in for like open extendable, flexible ecosystems which basically evolve on their own without constraining to like a specific like kind of platform or solution.
Awesome. I
Yeah,
really agree, and I look forward to the space hopefully wising up and just knowing that. I mean, I think it's been crazy just from a trader perspective watching the attention spans for some of these AI projects we get. It's like every day there's three new, incubator platforms or AI launch pads, and they'll go to, whatever crazy market cap in 2 hours and then come back down. And it's just like, all right, people, like at a certain point, we're gonna have to give somebody a
it's just
discount.
gambling. No. I mean, this is like essentially just gambling, right? But with coins instead of going to a casino. So it's essentially the same thing what we see right now. But in general, I do think the good tech has always been needed. Coming back to your question quickly, the good tech has always been needed, but it seems to be that we're still very early in general. And if you really go outside of the Web3 bubble and talk to people about crypto, the general perception is just still very negative. I mean, and that's what I mean from an outside perspective. I mean, what would you think about the industry if you see all of these random coins going out and like people suddenly become millionaires out of thin air? It's pretty wild, and so that's why there's this gambling attitude because right now the industry just attracts a lot of like speculators, and this will change over time. That's my point of view here, as we saw it, like or like have seen it with the internet. So yeah, it's just a matter of time, and then things will get more streamlined at one point.
Yeah.
It will become normal for everyone essentially that like there's going to be millions of coins launching every week, right? It's just going to be normal. Right now, it's pretty weird.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I mean, it's interesting just to see the pace that the market digests that, because like you saw following, Trump coin, which came out of left field and printed plenty millionaires, that it was just like a 3 day cycle of more politically fueled memes than we've ever seen. But of course, the staying power for those is like it's just nothing, right? Because it's like it's just gambling, exactly to your point, and you're already seeing that kind of die down. Where I don't doubt that there's still tens of thousands of these political coins being launched, but the market certainly appears to be smartening up a little bit where we're not just seeing those run rampant day after day after day. So it'll be interesting once it kind of realizes like, hey, we got to slow down and readjust. But I'm sure there'll always be a sub pocket. Apologies, I do have fun questions, but I did have one more just because I really want to hear from perspectives of builders. What do you make of this deep seek news that's kind of been sweeping up crypto lately and U.S. tech stocks as well? I know you guys aren't based in the US, but I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts as to DeepSeek? Is this something that we should be celebrating the innovation? Is there any threat to like existing AI projects out there? Would just love any takes you guys have on it.
Yeah, I can say that. To me, it's definitely like an indication of a trend that inference is getting just like dirt cheap, and the models are getting more and more smart. And I never believed that there will be like a single dominant player like OpenAI or like Anthropic that kind of like eating up all the space. And yeah, it's just like happened way faster than I expected. In general, I think it's super bullish for everything simply because it's open source, and it just shows how this Moore law applies to inference as well, right? So it's like order of magnitude cheaper compared to OpenAI, and it just like shows that you can build stuff with much less capital. And yeah, and certainly huge respect to the people who invented this. They are definitely crack engineers. I don't really know exactly whether they're just like a CCP psyop or they're indeed just like traders that are got bored and like got idle GPUs. But yeah, it's definitely super bullish to the space.
I appreciate your perspective on there. It really is interesting to see, and we'll see how it unfolds. But all right, we don't have any requests for the audience, but I did promise you a fun question. So I have two. I got one for you specifically, Dimitri. I saw an interview with you And prior to the SQDGN revealed, you were wearing a hoodie with Squid DGen on it. What's up with the Pepe Squid? Where did you sort of get this idea from, and what prompted you to make a hoodie with it?
Oh yeah, that's like a funny story. Actually, that is a super OG t-shirt that was printed in the very early days of SQD, and back then we have like a very like degen Discord server, and just like some anon came up with a sticker pack, and then yeah, we saw this like squid pep and like what the fuck, and then we decided to have like a sticker pack and printed this on a t-shirt as a merch, very limited edition. I think only 100 t-shirts were ever printed, and right now I keep it as a kind of OG SQD status symbol and wear it to many conferences as a kind of an indications and like remembering the roots. And I just like personally like how this dude looks like.
I love it. Yeah, I really like it. I see we got Lizard Capital in the audience repping the guy there. So there you go. I mean, who would have known that an anonymous person was going to launch just the the face of an AI agent and get some crowd support? But that's awesome. One final question I have for you and Marcel, just in a fun question vein, is what do you think your average screen time per day is? And I see Dimitri fell off the call here. It might just be Twitter glitching, but feel free to take it, Marcel. I'm just curious, what would you say on average you look at screens for?
You mean just like my normal computer screen?
You could do phones too, just like screens cumulatively
Oh
over a day.
yeah, it's too much. It's gonna be a ridiculous time, and actually, it's too scary to probably even try to figure it out. So I would assume, I don't know, more than 8 hours a day for sure.
Oh yeah.
If you include the mobile phone, for sure.
I think I'm the same, dude. I think I might be eight
Yeah,
hours.
I
Just
don't want. Yeah, I don't want to say the truth, which I probably expect it's gonna be like over 12 hours. But
that's crazy.
yeah, I mean it's half past midnight for me right now, and yeah, the next meetings are in like a couple of hours already. So
Oh man. All right.
yeah,
Well, I
there's a lot of screen time usually for a founder, so you
uh
have to live with it.
well, I appreciate it. I didn't realize it was so late where you were. But I just want to thank you both again. I really appreciate it. Just to give people who are listening a little bit of background. Like I said, I handpick all the guests for the show, and my goal for Does Compute is just to speak to really interesting founders. And I could just tell from, looking at what the SQD team has been building, what they currently are building. I knew that they were going to have a really interesting perspective. And again, just being genuine here with all the projects that I've interviewed, they have really just had an amazing way offering these eloquent answers and just well thought out, responses that only comes from a lot of time in the space and really understanding their product at a very deep and intentional level. So Dimitri, Marcel, thank you both just so much for your time and agreeing to do this. It's really been a pleasure to speak with you, and I hope we get to see some updates on SQDGN and SQD. I'm definitely going to be following up with the project and just keeping tabs on both. But just thank you guys so much. It's been awesome getting your perspective on everything and talking about the space.
Thanks a
Yeah,
lot for
thanks for
having
having
us.
us.
Fantastic
Yeah,
questions and like fantastic convo. Really enjoyed the space.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you guys so much to everyone listening. Until next time, we'll catch you later.
cheers, bye
Thank
bye,
you.
have a great day.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.